right, folks, we are back here deep in the second hour of Straight Out of the Cannon with me, Scott Cannon. Hope you like the Richie Havens, legendary man. Doesn't get the props he deserves, in my opinion. Let me get this caller before I start the last topic. Hello, caller. Hello, caller.
Good evening, Mr. Scott.
What's up?
I want to get your opinion on a couple of things.
Well, we got to go to the next topic. Call back on Tuesday. Me and Rev's show is basically that.
Okay. All right.
But thanks for calling. Trump having his first week in office and Biden leaving office is really not the only thing that was going on last week. A bunch of stories started coming out. We started seeing a lot of the data from 2024 come out. And actually, we have some good news, some really good news. Homicide rates are way down from the year 2023 and the year 2024. Hallelujah. 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 Yes. U.S. police departments are releasing preliminary and finalized crime numbers from 2024, and a lot of different police departments all over America are reporting historic declines in homicides and drops in other violent crimes in comparison to 2023. Experts say that most cities are seeing a drop in crime after the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, we saw like huge spikes in crime in 2020, 2021, 2022. Saw really big spikes in crime. We started to see a drop in crime last year, a little bit of a crime drop in 2023. 2024 looks like it's even going to be a even bigger crime drop. New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Phoenix, Houston, Detroit, Baltimore, and dozens of other American cities have reported huge drops in homicides in comparison to 2023. Now, some saw small decreases, like New York City had 14 fewer homicides than the 391 that they saw in 2023. Now, even that 391 is not. If you look at where New York City was for much of the 20th century, it is basically a drop in the bucket. In the early 90s, New York used to have 2,000 murders a year. You heard that right. 2,000 murders a year in New York City. In 1933, they had 541. So even during the 1930s, they were well over 500 murders. So in 2023, which was seen as somewhat of a bad year, they had 391. This year they had 377. Should I say this past year? The worst years they got was in 1990. They had 2,245 murders in New York City. That is incredible. 91, they had 2,154. In 92, they had 1,995. You started to see the drop after the 1990 high, which was incredible, to the point where they got down to 292 in 2017. And so that's why the 391 looks like, oh my God, New York City is going back to where it was. No. New York City, for virtually from the late 60s all the way up until 1995, had over 1,000 murders every year. Every single year between 1969 in 1995, they had at least 1,000 murders a year. So this is why I always tell you guys when the media is fear-mongering about crime and stuff, to put things in perspective. New York City's had less murders every year the last decade than they had in 1930. So this isn't really like surprising in a lot of the big cities in America. Now, Philadelphia had a huge decrease. They went from 398 murders in 2023 to 255. So they had like 140 less murders in 1 year. Now, there were only a few cities where homicides did increase, including Charlotte, North Carolina, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Now, I know what you're wondering. What about us? How did we do in the year 2024? Lake and Porter County have released their 2024 statistics. And, you know, city of Gary, we actually saw 40 homicides in 2024, which is a 23% decline from the 52 in 2023. That is the lowest that we've had since 2018. So again, there's a lot of fear-mongering about crime in the city of Gary and about violence in the city of Gary when, again, things were a lot worse in the past. Not only that, our police department's homicide closure rate is 74%, which is much higher than the national average of only 58%. Now that's surprising to me that only about half of the murders in America a little bit more than half of the murders in America get solved. That's crazy to me. Whereas in the city of Gary, it's about 3/4, which is a good thing. We should give our police department here in the city of Gary, we should give them some applause for that. Yes, big shout out to all the boys over at the police department, the GPD. Apparently you guys are doing are better than average police department. Hammond had 10 homicides in 2024, which is 4 more than the 6 that they had in 2023. So things is going in a little bit in the opposite direction for Hammond. But the real story, the real surprise is East Chicago. East Chicago has seen a 69% homicide decrease in just a 4-year span. They only had 4 homicides in 2024. As somebody who grew up in the 80s and 90s in East Chicago, before I moved out here to Gary, let me tell you, that's surprising. Only 4, especially on Guthrie Street in the Bucket of Blood. They literally used to call it the Bucket of Blood. That's a neighborhood in East Chicago, the Bucket of Blood. So to see that EC only has about 4 homicides in 2024, that's a good thing. That is a good thing. Robberies were down in all of the 10 largest cities in America. That's a good thing. Robberies were down in all of the 10 largest U.S. cities. And across the board, car thefts were down by double-digit percentages. But here's why I always do these type of stories, right? People always wonder, like, why do I do these type of stories? Every year I talk about whether crime is up or down, and I highlight where crime is in historical context. And this is why. In an October Gallup poll that asked Americans whether they believe crime is up, or not, 77% of Americans thought that crime was up. in 2023. 64% thought so in 2024. Right. Okay. So still, Americans generally think that crime is a lot higher than it actually is in most instances. No surprise that because it was during the Biden administration, the disparity between Republicans and Democrats is pretty high. 90% of Republicans believe that there is more crime. 90%. Which sort of feeds into this idea that I've had, this belief that I've had for a long time, that a lot of Republicans are just perpetually terrified of cities. Like, a lot of these people are just watching Fox News or watching whatever, and they see something on the news and they just think that they're going to come to New York or Chicago or come to Gary and just get murdered, and that's just not the reality of the situation. The overwhelming majority of people who get murdered, whether it's here, whether it's in Chicago, whether it's in LA, whether it's in New York, most of the people who get killed are people who are involved in crime in some way. It's usually gang violence or drug violence or the type of violence, domestic. There's a lot of domestic violence. So between domestic violence and drug crime and gang crime, that makes up the overwhelming majority of the crime that happens, and the overwhelming majority of people get killed any given time. Random people are not just being murdered in mass in this country. But if you listen to the media, they will make you believe, especially in black neighborhoods, that just random people are out. There's just murderous gangs out attacking and killing white people all day. That just doesn't happen. Especially someplace like Gary. And it's important to state that, folks. It is important to throw some reality on the situation. Because a lot of people truly believe that urban areas are just these crime-ridden cesspools that are just filled with all these criminals. And this is a big part of the reason why when police brutality happens, when situations like George Floyd or Michael Brown happens, much of the country is like, good. Serves them right. They truly believe that there's nothing but looting and shooting and violence going on in most urban areas. And that is just not factually correct. As I just showed you, violent crime has really plummeted. It's been on a historical decline for the last 30 years or so. The pandemic knocked us off of that briefly, but now we're sort of back to where we were pre-pandemic. So please enjoy Gary, enjoy New York City, enjoy Chicago, enjoy LA. The odds of anything bad happening to you in any of these places, if you're a law-abiding, upstanding citizen, is pretty low. And don't, stop listening to the corporate media as well. I really can't reiterate that enough. Okay, folks.